watching a show called Taken Away, at least for a while. I have a migraine. Um, but I know a lot about this particular topic. I spent time in the system, and I knew between all the families that I stayed with, I knew about probably about 10 kids. About half of them were actually family members of the foster parents, but about 10 kids that were adopted. And then some people that I was in college with, they adopted a child from overseas. And then, having spent as much time in Southeast Asia as I have encountered a lot of various nationalities in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, who are adopted by non-Pacific Rim, non-Asian country citizens, most of them U.S. and Canada. Um, and I have an intimate experience, as in happening to my family, of it's a complicated situation, but out of the desire for adoption, actually a marriage took place that ended mine. Um, somebody didn't have any heirs, but I'm not going to get into that here. But I accept God's will. But anyway, I encountered a lot of women in the Pacific and Southeast Asia that, when people would come from the first world, with money in hand, um, there's a lot of opportunities for people to be, if you want to boil it down to it, trafficked. We'll pay for the adoption because there's a lack of regulation. The embassies try, especially our embassy. They actually have a program that attempts to prevent trafficking, but it's easy to disappear in the province and to have somebody sign something, whatever country you're in, and it happens, and babies are adopted. And you see a lot of this, with people who have means. Some of these people are of incredible means. Um, and then you find some people, maybe they have a medical problem. I'm not going to go into my theories about why we find so many of these medical problems in the first world, women that can't have children. But I have my theories about that. You don't see so much. Um, what's that word I'm looking for? You don't see so much infertility in other parts of the world. The first world, especially the U.S., Canada, Europe, it's a rampant problem. But we have the highest proportions of it. Like I said, I have my own theories why. But so I have some experience with this, and we can't forget how various destructive parties have been trying. Always remind me. Well, if you can't handle this, you can always give your daughter to her mother or to your brother. Your brother's here. Um, More times than not, I'm sick of it. Even from MDHHS, those kind of comments, I'm sick of it. Um, I think it would be disingenuous, and it would be a betrayal to my daughter, a full betrayal to her, for me to so easily hand her to my family that have done nothing but ignore the things that have happened, that have done nothing but promote gaslighting. Sometimes even her own mother, I will confront her and hold her accountable. But yet, I understand her mother's situation. It's complicated. It's complicated. She walked into something in love and found out it was something quite different. But there's a point where you have so many kids, you're stuck. You used to see this 40 or 50 years ago when women are forced to be bare feet and pregnant. A lot of women just get stuck. They're scared of the situation that would happen if they left. Um, they may have good times too, but there's less love there than there is arrangement. But anyway, but so people need to consider, with a certain degree of humility, um, like Sarah did, like Abraham's wife Sarah, um, and also there's others who just accepted God's will and then were given a blessing. Our Lady, and uh, and then approach things with a certain degree of humility and hesitance and awe. You know, viewing this, watching this show, just see how things can go wrong. Taking away children or even convincing children and babies to be given away because a wife is down and out, or not a wife, excuse me, a mother is down and out because she may not be a wife. Um, she's at the worst moments of her life. She's vulnerable, and statistically, she's probably on her own. So, putting these girls in this situation and then compound poverty, sometimes generational poverty, even in the States. And then you compound it even more and you go overseas. Various areas that Latin America, Southeast Asia, Western and I think Western and Central Africa. Um, these girls, they're targeted so that people can find babies. And many of these girls, this is not the best thing for them. And it says to me, like I've seen, in my experience with my daughter, people, have sabotaged us repeatedly. People just keep doing stuff and nobody does anything about it. And so I can think back, especially for those American girls that this has happened to, and I can, just think back what's happened to me and then compare that to their situation. And also, it seems disingenuous to those girls, our countrymen, our country women, that they weren't important enough to help, but their children were important enough to take away. And I'm excluding, even abroad, families that gave their children up because of oppressive regimes. I know, like I said, I know some people that actually happened. Um, I'm excluding them, or mothers that were sick, or maybe the baby was made through forced. Um, how could we put this nicely? Forced interaction. Um, you know, I mean, even from incest. Um, I mean, some people would rather have a child, but the medical complications, the medical complications would be complicated. Medical complications would be overwhelming, taking that kind of a risk. Um, I mean, we all know the history of the royals, of various family lines, the medical problems that came from this. Even from a first or second cousin, great ramifications down the line genetically because of because of these kind of children that are born with too close kinship of the parents. But it's just really disingenuous that it's like they've consumerized babies and children. That's the best way I can describe it. It's been consumerized, and I just this is just another example of how our culture is becoming unempathetic, unsympathetic, has no focus on justice, and it's just I don't know. It's a very bad road we're going down. What's wrong with a family that really wants a baby? They really want to enlarge their family. Why don't they adopt the mother too? You see that happen so rarely. Oh, people want their own family. It's theirs. It's an adopted child. It will never be completely theirs. If they adopt the mother and the child, they're enlarging their family by two. And it seems to me that would be compounding the blessing. That's the way I look at it. I may not be the most wisest person, but I think that's probably the kind of thing that Solomon would say too. And having lived what I have lived, people, just dead set on ripping apart my family. And one of my daughters I haven't talked to since 2014, and we don't know where she is. And because I'm in financial captivity, I can't go find her. And it seems that people are trying to make sure that I never get back over there. But I think things are complex, and I would say to families out there, really pray about this and really search yourself and really, look for what's better, not for your gut, for the greed. Oh, I want a child that's mine. That's when greed steps in. Look for the bigger picture. Why not? Take. More than likely, this girl from whatever country. This is the same story again and again and again that I've encountered. In my travels, I've encountered a lot of sex workers. This is their story. Except here in the U.S., we think we're so high and mighty and we're so civilized. We take their children away and give them to the state so the state can make money. The girl ends up with nothing. Many times after a while, they lose all their benefits or most of them, and the child goes to the Children's Institute of the state, whatever state they're from, which they get some federal kickbacks from, and it certainly helps with budgeting to hold them in that system for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, a year, and it commoditizes babies, children. We know what they do with the adults that are in similar type situation. They get shipped off to group homes, or if they can find it, to a forensic hospital. I think that we take an arrogant position over the rest of the world because we're so far above human trafficking, but we're not. We're not at all. To use one of my favorite words, we operationalize it. And we find all kinds of laws and all kinds of systems, to say that we don't do it. But when you boil it down, we are. So people should really pray, about what they're doing. And the mothers too, why not step out and try to help them a little more? Agencies, the state. And, why some of those adoptive parents that are desperate for kids, what if they considered adopting a mother and a child? Double the blessing.